Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And we have good news and bad news today. Question is it time for you to run? When you go to the Serengeti, you see the wildebeest migrating all over the Serengeti plains. And in America today, there's Americans migrating out of New York and San Francisco and Portland and Seattle, and they're all in Chicago, and they're all migrating to safer cities. But the question is, for those who are citizens of one country, because we're an international broadcast here, the time for you to consider migrating to another country, another residence, or having a dual passport. Comments, Kim?
Well, I think this is a fascinating subject because there is a huge migration out of the big cities. Even Phoenix, even though Phoenix is a big city, we're getting a lot of people coming in. I drove by a U-Haul dealership yesterday, and it was packed with U-Hauls, meaning people are moving in, and people are moving to all the small towns all over. So there is an exodus, and now the question is, do we want to exit the U.S.? I think people, think this is the greatest country in the world, and as we know, because we travel all over the world, there's a lot of great countries around the world, and I don't know. We have a great guest, and he's gonna explain it step by step on what that means.
Well, today our guest is Andrew Henderson. He's a managing partner of Nomad Capitalists, which helps people go offshore. In other words, migrate, keep their wealth, and enjoy global freedom. It's going to be after nearly a dozen years in visiting and living in 100+ countries. Mr. Henderson has become an expert on the growing field of global citizenship.
And I love enjoy global freedom, because that's our concern, of course, is what's happening today with COVID and all of this, that more and more of our freedoms and liberties are going to be taken away. And that's our number one concern. So this is a really great show and timely show.
So Andrew's not going to say which country he's a resident of.
We're not going to ask.
And we're not going to ask, and I'll ask him what he's concerned about. So I want to know what he's concerned about. But Kim and I have traveled the world for 30 years now, and I've never really considered leaving this country. And so, but for the first time, we're thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And not only leaving the country, but getting our dinero out of this country, because it looks like confiscation is coming in. So Andrew, welcome to the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome, Andrew.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Would you explain how in the world you became a nomad capitalist, and what are the pros and cons and that kind of stuff?
Well, I got a great permission slip at a very young age. I had a father who saw the things that you're talking about. He looked at this stuff back in the mid-90s, and he said, listen, you don't have to stay here. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which if you're from the United States, you know that the answer to that is, I'm sorry to hear that. So we were never tethered. We never felt we had to stay there. And he said, listen, especially if you're going to be in business, because I was interested in business starting about 12 years old. He said, listen, you should go where you're treated best. You don't have to stay here in the city, the state, even in the country. And he was looking at places like New Zealand long before anyone was talking about it. And so I started some businesses in the United States. I guess some of them did all right. And never entirely felt happy, never entirely felt free. The social dynamics for me weren't entirely there in the United States. And I was paying a lot of taxes. And I said, listen, there's got to be a better way to do this. I was doing things on VoIP phones back in the day. I'd be calling people, I'd be sending emails. It could be done from anywhere. Why am I living in the U.S.? Why am I paying these taxes? And I started this process of traveling, self-discovery. I started noticing differences. Why is this bank paying higher interest? Why is this real estate market performing differently? Why are things over here more safe? Why are these people different? And I realized that every country has something that they're best at. No country is number one at everything, let alone perhaps anything. And I said, well, why am I pooling all my resources under the control of one government, which is broke? And why don't I live overseas? And I'm a resident of a couple different countries. I'm in Malaysia right now. But, certainly it's different. A lot of people don't understand it, but it gives you a lot more freedom. And you get to choose the places for your banking, for your investing, for your real estate, for your passport, for everything, dating, whatever it may be. Where am I treated the best? And I don't think most of us can say that, if we're honest, about any one country.
That's correct. Kim and I travel to Australia a lot, and we always thought, well, maybe someday we'd move there, but they shut down the whole country.
Yeah.
And you look at that, draconian legal systems. where do you move to?
Yep.
So,
and Andrew, you said you talk about banking, taxes, quality of life. You're not saying one country. You're saying
Right.
operate out of many countries. Find what treats you best in all these different areas. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what's changed in perhaps my lifetime, where it used to be, all right, what is the place? And I think people still have that mindset. I would say choose from the buffet. So I would live in Malaysia, for example. This is one of many places you can go where they're pretty open to people coming and immigrating here if you have a little bit of money. But the banks, I think, are fine. But you're next to Singapore. It's one of the world's great wealth havens, so bank there. If you have precious metals, maybe you want to store them there. I've been an investor in real estate in Cambodia, for example, and that's done very well, and it's been very recession-proof over the last 25 years or so. I wouldn't live in Cambodia, nor would I live in Singapore, so I'm kind of in the middle for living, but I'm taking advantage of the stability of places to store assets, for example, as well as the growth potential of markets that are up and coming. And so, yeah, I think choose from the buffet.
So let me ask you this. What are some of the mistakes that people make? You don't want to, take your passport and run and then violate all kinds of laws. So what are some of the mistakes that people make when they're migrating?
Well, it's funny. My wife and I were watching this spy show again, and it's funny to watch all the things that are inaccurate about people with their numbered Swiss bank accounts, and they're taking $10 million in cash to some Aruban bank. I mean, it's not really how it works. And so we're not talking about hiding money. We're not talking about, hiding anything from the IRS. This is more about showing and telling than it is about hiding stuff. That's the old school way to do it. It doesn't really work anymore. You've got laws like FATCA, CRS, all kinds of things. So if you're an American, it is more difficult because you are always taxed, no matter where you live as a U.S. citizen. If you just go and live as a U.S. citizen in Malaysia, they're still going to tax you. Now, you can get some exemptions. You can set up a foreign corporation that's zero tax. You can pay yourself a salary. You can defer some retain. You can do some things to dramatically reduce your taxes, but you're still in the U.S. tax net, whereas anybody else, for the most part, can simply leave their country and then go to some other country that treats them better. So it's a bit more difficult for Americans. And what I see is people don't often put the holistic pieces together, where they get advice from a guy on Hong Kong on setting up their company in Hong Kong, but then nothing is compliant on the U.S. side. Or they move overseas and they open a bank account and they don't realize they've got to file a form with the Treasury every year saying, here's where my money is. You're allowed to have bank accounts, but you need to report, where the bank accounts are. And so you've got the asset protection, but you're not hiding your money. And I think people need to understand that's what this is about, is the legality.
Well, right now with the economy so bad all over the world, there's a lot of countries selling passports. And then, because it's a way of generating revenue. Like Kim and I we're talking to George Gammon, great guy, but he doesn't live in America. He lives someplace else. And he was talking about St.
Lucia or St. Lucia. You can basically buy a passport there. Tell me, Andrew, where are some of the places to consider in terms of living? Quality of life.
Yeah, so I'm a proud St. Lucian citizen. They're one of 5 countries in the Caribbean that's decided we're a small country. We'd like to raise revenue. The big high-tax countries have come in and run out our offshore financial centers. That was how the UK wanted us to make money when we became independent. Now they don't like it anymore, so we need some other way to bring in revenue and build housing and do things for our people. And so I'm very proud of that. But I think that what I would look at those kind of passports at is some way to give yourself diversification from a country that's going to leave you alone. So if you're a U.S. citizen, they're regulating every aspect of your life until you decide you're no longer going to be a U.S. citizen. And so I think a lot of people like the idea, you don't have to give up your citizenship, and most people don't, but if you want to take it all the way, being a St. Lucian gives you a lot more freedom because they don't really chase you down all over the world. And so I wouldn't necessarily live in St. Lucia. What I would say is be a St. Lucian, be whatever your citizenship is, and then go and find places. So I've been a big fan of Malaysia. I've been a big fan of parts of Mexico. I've been a big fan of places in Eastern Europe like Montenegro. I've got a home. The country of Georgia, I think, is very interesting. A little different if you're an American, but great food, great wine. So, there's something for everybody. Obviously, some people like Monaco. That's pretty old school, right? But I think there's a lot of up-and-coming places that are what I call the hidden gems. Malaysia probably being a great one. It's kind of like the United States of Asia with all the good parts and not the bad parts for the most part. And I think very adaptable if you speak English and you just want that normal kind of American life. So there's many places to go, but again, I would separate the citizenship from where you actually live.
Okay.
Another question I have is, you have a passport, and some places won't let American, especially today with the pandemic.
Right.
can't fly here, you can't fly there. But we have a friend who has an Italian passport, and she flew to Amsterdam or something, but she was into the EU, and then she flew back on a U.S. passport.
Right.
Now, are those some of the advantages of a multiplicity of passports?
Well, generally speaking, you have to enter and leave your own country on that passport, right? So if you're an American, you're there as an American, right? You can't commit a crime and then claim I'm also French or something and go to the French embassy. I mean, you're an American, they treat you like that. So you need to enter and leave on those passports. But sure, I mean, if you have two countries where you're allowed to get into, I mean, I think that's been the best situation to have right now. In some countries, permanent residence has been pretty equal, or even temporary residence. But tourists are kind of the last on the list. So I think having, whether it's a passport or a residence, I have a number of each, and it's been very helpful where I can go certain places and they need to let me in. And so if you're an EU citizen like Italy or France or Spain or whatever, then you've got a great benefit. And what's cool about those, by the way, is you can go through your parents, grandparents, sometimes even great-grandparents, and you can go back through your family tree and possibly get one of those for not a lot of money, just basically the embassy fees.
Yeah, I looked into that because my grandparents are from Sweden, both of them, but Sweden does not participate in that. Or I don't know if it's the U.S. side or the Swedish side.
Yeah, the Swedish side, if your parents are Swedish, but I think that's about as far as they go. So like Ireland, Italy, Poland is a little bit more difficult, Hungary, we're doing Estonia for someone now, Croatia. So a lot of them do it, but some of them don't go too far back.
Can you do these services, Andrew? Because there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of regulations, and as you said earlier, we don't want to find out we've made a huge mistake once we've already made the change.
Well, what we do is, I've experienced doing this, and so I've learned things the hard way. I've built up a network by traveling around. I mean, to me, this is not theory. This is how I live. And so what we do is we do the international tax planning, banking, financial stuff. We do the residence and citizenship, and then we do potentially there's some investments that you want to make. So let's say you want to get a residence permit somewhere, or you want to get a passport. How do you invest to get that? And then we put it under one tent, basically, so you're not talking to 7 different people. Because if you're an American, you're right. If you open a bank account in Malaysia to get the residence permit and you don't report that to the U.S., you're going to be in trouble. So I think it's important that you look at the whole picture. And if, again, I keep mentioning U.S. citizens having a special burden.
Do you buy your property when you're in Malaysia? Do you own your property or do you rent?
I do buy. I like control. I like decorating. I like a certain environment. And I do buy,
I understand. Oh, it's interesting.
Do you buy investment property as well all over the world?
I have bought investment property. The challenge I have right now with this whole pandemic situation is, I'm looking at, maybe I shouldn't rent that property. I should just keep it in case I get stuck in that place. In case I'm flying through Turkey or something, I'm looking at some property in Turkey. I think there's some great deals, and I think people think it's really a disaster, and I think maybe it'll be all right in the long term. But, so I'm looking at that and saying, I should rent it. But, maybe I'm flying from somewhere to somewhere and I'm going through Turkey and there's a problem because people can't travel and at least I have a place to stay. So I have done investment properties, but I like having a collection of places to live around the world. And I'll tell you, if you're looking for an escape plan, I've got a lot of people this year who are calling about that more than ever. I think having like a psychologically comfortable place where you can go. It's one thing to have a passport. But if you've got a home somewhere and it's one flight away, I think you're going to be more motivated knowing that you know what the house looks like, you know what the towels are, you feel comfortable there. I think that if you don't have that, you might be more reticent to leave because so many people, you hear this, they say, I'll leave when it gets bad enough. And how many decades have we been hearing that? And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. And I think too, for Americans, like for Europeans, for Australians, Asians, they're used to traveling to other countries so often. In the U.S., we're not. So many of us don't even have a passport. But what about the mindset of, it's like COVID. Everybody's so afraid they don't go outside. Well, once you go outside, you find out, oh, it's not so bad. I'm not going to die. But with the U.S., to say, oh, I'm going to get residency someplace else, it's like almost like against the rules or the law or whatever.
Well, there is that. And again, the media doesn't do any great service because, especially in the U.S., people just think, again, I watch these shows and you see the silliest comparisons. I've got a lot of people who are working for me in Serbia. We have great people in Serbia and it's less expensive and they're getting paid a lot more than all their friends. But every time I watch one of these shows, it's like, ooh, the Serbian villains, right? You go to Serbia, these people, they wouldn't hurt a fly. So, I think it's interesting. I think that you need to dip your toe in. And I think one thing I've said is go and open a bank account somewhere. Go to a country like a Georgia or an Armenia or an Ecuador where you can get an account as a non-resident with very little money and just watch and just look and just see what happens with it. And 6 months later, when your money's still there, maybe you go to the ATM, you take out some money, you use the debit card, you just inch closer to feeling that this is okay. And then you file what's called the F-bar in the U.S. on your alongside your taxes, and okay, I'm doing this legally, and everyone knows what's going on. I think that you can kind of dip your toe into this if you're not comfortable, and feel more comfortable over time.
So we come back, we'll be talking more to our guest is Andrew Henderson. He's talking about being a nomad capitalist. It's very interesting, exciting times. I never thought about it before seriously, but the more screwy it gets here in America, the more it becomes a consideration. So we're not just talking about America. I think the idea of being a nomad capitalist today, because of the way technology and the cell phones and banking works, why not? So we'll come back, we're talking more to Andrew Henderson. Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Today our guest is Andrew Henderson. We're talking about being a nomad capitalist, and the idea you don't have a first passport, you start with that, but maybe a second passport for those who already have the first one. Anyway, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anywhere, anytime on iTunes, Android, and YouTube. And please leave a comment whenever you listen to it. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because we're an education company only. We don't sell or recommend investments. And we're definitely not recommending you get another passport and run unless you want to. But anyway, the reason we archive this is so you can listen to this program again, because you'll learn more the second time, pick up new things. But more important, we have friends, family member, and business associates who think it might be a good time to relocate or get another business someplace else in the world. This is your program. So go to richdadradio.com and listen to this program one more time.
And Andrew he's also the author of the book Nomad Capitalists, and it's a book that discusses all the concepts of, there it is. Hold that up again, Andrew. Hold that book up again. Nomad Capitalists, that discusses all about global citizenship. And I love, Andrew, what you call your 5 magic words: go where you're treated best. I love that. So to Robert's point, some people in their country, wherever they live, don't even have their own passport. Is that the first step?
Well, I think so. And it's funny, I sold a property. I had 2 properties in Montenegro. I sold one of them, and we were trying to do everything through power of attorney. And the guy, it took us, a long time to sell the property because he was trying to renew his U.S. passport. But conveniently, right, they said we're not issuing any U.S. passports for a while. And it took us, many months to get his new U.S. passport, to get the passport number, to make the power of attorney, to do the sale. So, if you can't even travel out of your own country, that's number one. And then I would say, number one, ask yourself, what am I willing to do? Do I want to save on taxes? If you're willing to live overseas for a majority of the year, if you're willing to move to Puerto Rico if you're an American, you can dramatically, cut your taxes by anywhere from 70 to 90%, potentially even to 100% in some limited circumstances. Do I want to move my money? Do I feel comfortable with my money? I saw a report in the Great Recession, the last one. U.S. banks, 40th safest in the world. I don't know how many, could any of us name 39 other countries that we would think would be safer, right? And so I think it's just going through and saying, what do I feel uncomfortable about? But certainly if you don't have a passport, you're kind of stuck.
So when you talk about tax advantages, what should people be looking for? What are the questions to be asking?
Well, by the way, I love watching your channel on social media. There's really some great gems every day for business owners. I think people should be business owners, and that's a great way to go offshore because you can incorporate the business offshore, particularly if you're doing something where it's knowledge-based, if it's selling digital products, if it's selling advice, whatever, a little bit more complicated but doable with like a physical product. You can run that overseas. You can hire people overseas, less liability. It's more affordable to do. You can grow the business faster. And you can actually reduce your taxes because you're offshore. Now, again, if you're an American, there's certain things to consider, but you can exempt, for example, $107,000 or $8,000 a year in salary. And so if you've got a business partner or a spouse, you can double that potentially. Then you can dramatically reduce your tax on everything above that. And so it gives you a lot more money to put back into your business. It's harder to do that if as an American, if you're an employee. So I've got a friend who works in Dubai. He makes 7-figure salary. He gets the first 107 for free, and he pays on the rest because he's not a business owner. And as a U.S. citizen, They tax your worldwide income, even though Dubai does not. So to me, it's the case of people should start businesses. And if you have a business, you're a perfect candidate to go live in a tax-friendly place like in Malaysia and, save in your home countryside.
That's amazing. Where my most important question is, where can I go? I don't have to wear a stupid mask. That's that bugs me so much.
I'll tell you, one of the most open parts of the world right now, and I'm going to be going there next month, is in the Balkans. So I think Serbia is open to everybody. Turkey's open. I think Montenegro is largely open. North Macedonia, Albania have pretty much reopened, including, I think, most of those to Americans. I talk to people who work for me in some of those countries. Armenia is open. And these are very interesting countries that people don't think about. I mean, Montenegro, beautiful place, for example. And I'm hearing from people who work for me, and they're saying it's business as usual. Now, I mean, here in Malaysia, it's business as usual. Everything's open. But people are wearing masks, and I don't think it's a requirement, but people just do. But if you go to Eastern Europe, it seems they're just on with the show.
So what does it take to, let's say, move to Turkey? Turkey passport.
I don't know if I'd want to live in Turkey. I mean, Turkey's not the most tax-friendly place if you're living there full-time. You can get a residence permit, I believe, by buying any property you want. And they've got, Istanbul, if you're looking for like cheap apartments, 50 grand, we find stuff around Taksim Square for really, really cheap. But they do have actually a citizenship by investment program. If you put $500,000 in the bank, for example, or if you buy $250,000 in real estate, you get a citizenship instantly. So that's pretty cool. I mean, you buy an apartment in Istanbul, the lira's in the tank. You can get a decent deal. I'm looking at some of the deals a couple hours ago, and you get a citizenship. Now, is that the citizenship for you? I don't know. I mean, for Americans, it's kind of weird, being Turkish for some people. But, you buy a property, they give you a citizenship, and you can rent it, you can do whatever.
I'm looking for it is for gateways. In other words,
yeah,
that friend of yours who was Italian, she could fly into Europe, but as an American, you can't fly into Europe. So more it's access. I want the passport for access to different parts of the world. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Turkey. I think that, for being a St. Lucian or being a lot of these, lesser known passports, they're on the green list. And so I think I think a lot of passports right now are better than the U.S. passport. Can you go out and get one? I actually have people calling me saying I want to become St. Lucian or St. Kittsian or Antiguan so that I can do exactly that. I'll be on the green list, yeah.
You can fly from, let's say, St. Kitts to Europe or St. Kitts to Asia?
I guess depending on how you do it, you don't even have to go to St. Kitts. I mean, I think that's kind of been the weird thing throughout all of this is, I have a friend who does investment in Thailand and Cambodia, and he says all they care about is your passport. He says, I haven't been to the United States in so long, but all they care about is the passport. You could be a St. Lucian who was in the United States, and they're like, no, they'll let you in, but if you, so.
So let me ask this question again. Which passport from a different country will give me the most access to the world? That's what I want to know.
Oh, right now? Well, that's a good question, I guess. I don't entirely know, other than I think that, I have a lot of friends in Georgia, and I think they've got a pretty good passport right now for like getting into Europe. They're on the green list, so I think that's maybe a good one. I don't know what's the number one. I mean, the Japanese passport, the German passport, these are great, so I guess those are probably still pretty well respected. But I think you're seeing more countries put on naughty lists that are the big ones. So I think Japan is on some naughty lists. So I think it changes by the day.
So if I have a St. Lucia passport, I can fly from Phoenix and have access to all of Europe on my St. Lucia passport?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the policies. If they let you come from the U.S., maybe you need to go somewhere else first, maybe you don't. But St. Lucia has a lot more countries open to them right now. So you would just go and...
What does it take to get a Japanese passport?
You look Japanese.
I do.
Japanese is a really tough one. And we had actually a guy get it, and it was kind of really complicated. And it was through Ancestry and his parents and all that. And I guess if you go and live there, they've got a terrible tax regime. But if you go and live there and you learn the language and you renounce all of your other citizenships, I guess you can become Japanese. But it's really a tough one. It's really a tough one.
And Andrew, when you talk about like giving up your citizenship because you've given up your citizenship, what's the number? Maybe the mindset or the
ramifications.
The ramifications. That's a better word.
Well, I guess if you give it up and then you go and tell people on The Rich Dad and all the other great shows, I mean maybe the ramification is when you go and ask to come back in, they don't like you so much. But for everybody else, I mean, I've had people who've renounced, they're British, they're New Zealand, they're whatever. In some cases, we help them get those passports through their family. And they come back no problems. I mean, the ramifications are you get to live your life. You're not filing tax returns anymore. You're not subject to the rules. You can pretty much do what you want. And so, you know, I think, listen, you know, if people who come, they love their families, they can't imagine their families. I mean, my family comes, we spent last Christmas, they came to Mexico City. And they had a great time. And I don't think 10 years ago they would have been open to Mexico City. But they trust now that I know what I'm talking about in terms of where to go, and we were perfectly safe. We had a great time. And I mean, if you have to really think outside the box, and you have to realize there's a lot of countries out there. Maybe you can go back to the U.S., maybe you can't. But nobody else really cares too much. I think people are afraid that, like, you know, again, Malaysia is going to look at them poorly. Nobody cares. I mean, I went to the U.K., for example, as a St. Lucian, and they asked some questions. They tend to ask a lot of questions at the U.K. when you go in. And they asked me about the whole story, and I think he pretty much put it together. But it's not his problem. It's not his business. And so they say, great, you know, do we think you're going to leave within 180 days? Yes, come on in. We don't care if you're American or not. So I think it's a total mindset shift of understanding that, you know, most people are pretty agnostic to all this stuff.
How many passports do you have active?
I think 4. I'm working on a couple. I've kind of become a bit of a collector, I suppose.
And the reason for having multiple passports is it just gives you more flexibility, or is it place to go in case you get stuck?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point it becomes fun, I suppose. You know, I mean, yeah, I think it's more flexibility. It's certainly more travel. I mean, you have some passports which are more aligned with the East, and so maybe you can go to Russia with one passport. Other passports are more aligned with the West, and so you can go there. And so you put them together, you get, you know, great, you know, passport potential. So, you know, it's places you can live. It's places they have to let you in. For me also, I'll tell you, as a guy who didn't really feel entirely, you know, like I belonged in the U.S., there's kind of a sense with 1 or 2 of them where it's like, you know what, like maybe this is a place where, like, I can, you know, call home. I was looking at my own passport from my family tree, which is from Lithuania. And it's very difficult to get, and I've been working on it for years. But it's like if I were to have that, it'd be like, you know, this is my great-grandparents, and I feel like this is an identity. And so I think there's an emotional side to it. There's an asset protection side. There's a plan B kind of side, and there's a travel side.
Well, Kim's niece, they operate out of Los Angeles and New York City, but they live in Lisbon.
They just moved to Lisbon a couple months ago.
What's the advantage of that?
Well, people love Portugal. It's really been coming up. It's been really a great place. A lot of nomads are going. I think wealthier people going. There we had some of the backpackers and then the hipsters and people like that were going. But I mean, it's a beautiful place. You've got good weather. They have what's called the non-habitual resident tax regime, which is not quite as clean for Americans as it is for everybody else. But you can basically go there, and there's a lot of tax advantages. You can work towards a passport. If you make an investment in the country, you can work towards a passport without even being there, which is pretty unique, that, you know, you spend 2 weeks a year in a European Union, what I call Tier A country, and 5 or 6 years from now you get a passport. I think they're even probably going to get rid of the language requirement, so that's pretty easy if you have anywhere from 280,000 euros on up to invest. But Portugal's become a great place to live, great tax advantages, interesting passport to get, and probably one of the more laid-back European countries.
Okay, so how do people get in touch? Do you offer a service to guide people through this process?
We offer a really boutique service. It's largely, you know, 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs. We do what we call a holistic plan, so it covers all the bases of taxes and corporations, banking and all of that, resident, citizenship, tax residence, investing. I mean, everything goes into the pot, and we figure out how that works, and then we help people actually execute those plans with our network of people that I've developed over these years. You know, if you're not ready for that, I tell the people the first place to start is the book, because it's, you know, there's no best place. I think everyone's looking for like a best place. Like, what's the number one place for this? There's no best place. It depends on so many factors. I mean, it literally could be, you know, what kind of business do you have? Where are your employees? I mean, there's no one best place. But the book, which you can get on Amazon, talks about what's possible, what's not possible.
And your website is nomadcapitalist.com, right?
Yeah, it's nomadcapitalist.com. I think we've written close to 2,000 blog articles over the years. We've got 1,000 YouTube videos almost. So we put out a lot of free content, and the book, I think, probably amalgamates that. But yeah, nomadcapitalist.com. You can learn more about what we do.
Perfect.
So what's your, besides getting Nomad Capitalist a book, what's your final advice for
And that's great advice.
The average person who's just considering running for the border?
Well, I think you can start with whatever it is that you're comfortable with. You don't have to necessarily leave the country. You can have bank accounts, you can have investments, you can have a passport and never even leave your country. And I think understanding that, again, it's a buffet, it's a smorgasbord, you can pick the things that work for you. The other thing I would say is, how do I push past excuses? You can do this as a married, person. I do it. You can do this as a family. I have clients who do it. And so, everyone, not everyone, but some people have a reason for here's why I can't do it. Listen. Go where you're treated best. It's human nature, quite frankly, we want to go where we're treated best. And just realize how many of us are going and looking at reviews for the sushi restaurant we're going to tonight, and we're being very meticulous about that, but we're not really thinking about what would my country get? What would my bank get? What would my investments get if they were being reviewed? And so I think if you look at go where you're treated best and you get rid of the sacred cows, I think you'll open up a lot of possibilities.
Perfect. Okay, well, Andrew, again, Andrew Henderson is the author of Nomad Capitalist. His website is nomadcapitalist.com. And we thank you for your wealth of information and encouragement. And I would say it's very practical, realistic advice. So thank you, Andrew. I would too.
And I say we'll be talking, Andrew. We'll be talking.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.